Welcome back to Phoenix Talkback. Phoenix Talkback is the world's first Jewish and Chicano radio show. Hi, I'm Lou, and in the studio with me today is Santiago. Hello, Santiago.
Hello, Lou. Nice to be with you again.
And how are you?
Well, doing well. A lot of good news this week.
Okay, for that matter, let's get to the news. For the first time, scientists have created human embryos that are genetic copies of living people and used them to make stem cells, a feat that paves the way for treating a range of diseases with personalized body issues. Prospects for passage of a major immigration bill improved on Thursday when a bipartisan group of lawmakers in the House of Representatives in Washington declared that they had reached a tentative deal resolving disputes that had threatened to torpedo comprehensive immigration reform. The final sticking point, according to congressional sources, was over whether the undocumented now living in the United States who will gain legal status under the bill could participate in the new health care law known as Obamacare, which Republicans want to repeal for the 37th time. In Arizona, the Senate has approved expanding the state's Medicaid program, capping a rancorous debate that had split the Republican Party and had been building since January when Governor Jan Brewer issued a surprise call to increase Arizona's health care program for the poor. 6 Republican senators crossed over: Rich Crandall, John McComish, Bob Worsley, Steve Pierce, Adam Diggs, and Michelle Reagan. The injunction against Jan Brewer's executive order denying driver's licenses to DACA applicants has failed, with U.S. federal judge David Campbell citing that Brewer's policy preempts federal law, so the case can remain open. Next Saturday, the 25th of May, all around the nation, there will be a march against Monsanto. In the Phoenix area, the march will start in Tempe at 805 South Farmer Avenue. That's Saturday, May 25th. Next Saturday in Tempe, 805 South Farmer Avenue. And that is the news here on Phoenix Talkback. Well, Santiago, what do you think is the most impressive bit of news that you have noticed this week?
Well, I would have to say, without a doubt, the thing that's going to affect most Arizonans is the passage of the Medicaid access bill through the Senate with the help of, surprisingly enough, 5 Republicans. That is going to extend health care to almost 500,000 Arizonans.
Yes, yes.
And we have to be real careful that we understand that those largely are working poor. People that are out there working, trying to make a living, that can't afford health insurance. And the long-term savings are so incredible that people have to understand how much the federal government is paying, 80 cents on the dollar.
What a deal.
And we're covering 500,000 people. The most ideal way to manage health care is with prevention. Prenatal care, vitamins can save a child from birth defects, and the long-term cost savings are incalculable. Instead of having to take care of a child who may have a serious physical or mental disability, that could be prevented.
In other words, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Exactly.
And you've got Jan Brewer advocating for it to the surprise of the Tea Party. It seems like a no-brainer to me, but the Tea Party is still digging in their heels, and I understand some of the political fallout may be to try to primary out these Arizona senators who have crossed over, but I applaud them. I really do. Thank you, you guys.
As do I. I think it took a tremendous amount of courage on their part to stand up and do the right thing for the people of Arizona.
And speaking of birth defects, what do you think of the upcoming march in Tempe against Monsanto?
The GMO controversy has been waging for quite some time, and I think this is a real opportunity for a lot of people to let their voices be heard, get out there, and demonstrate the fact that there are alternatives.
Yeah, we'd like our voices to be heard, and in honor of the upcoming march in Tempe against Monsanto, we'd like to sing you this song, okay? Here we go.
Old Monsanto had a farm, he raised GMOs, and on that farm he spoiled the earth. He raised GMOs. Well, they wound up here and they wound up there. Superbugs, super weeds, nothing growing naturally. Old Monsanto had a farm, he raised GMOs. Old Monsanto had a farm, he raised GMOs. And on that farm he had some cows, they ate GMOs. Well, the pigs did too, and the chicks did too. All the farm animals gobbling up chemicals. Old Monsanto had a farm, he raised GMOs.
Yeah.
Old Monsanto had a farm, he raised GMOs. And now he sells them in the store. No one ever knows. Not a label here or a label there. Makes you want to holler, pull out your hair. Old Monsanto had a farm, he raised GMOs. And someday we will all become human GMOs.
Thank you very much. Well, we will return to Phoenix Talkback after this break, and stay tuned. Jose Penalosa, immigration attorney, is coming up on Phoenix Talkback.
If you believe in natural food, come out to the march this Saturday in Tempe at Tempe Farmers Market, 805 South Farmer Avenue in Tempe, Arizona. There will be guest speakers, vendors, music, and family activities. We will march against Monsanto at 10 a.m. May 25th at the Tempe Farmers Market, 805 South Farmer Avenue. Let's take back our food together.
A&B Automotive is your local auto care center, trusted with your vehicle since 1995. They are your local service center for light trucks, domestic, and foreign vehicles. Their experience ensures that your vehicle is well maintained all year round. It's the small repairs that prevent costly breakdowns, and you can trust A&B Automotive ASE certified expertise in everything from oil changes, tune-ups and brakes, to drivetrain and engine repairs. It's what they do to make your vehicle reliable when you need it most. Go see A&B Automotive at 1235 East Dunlap in Phoenix, Arizona, or call them at 602-906-9579. Se habla español. They're also on the web at abautomotiveaz.com. That's A&B Automotive, 1235 East Dunlap in Phoenix. 602-906-9579. Wow, Santiago, we're hit makers. Maybe we should become singers.
I don't think so. I doubt it.
Okay. Well, we have a special guest in the studio today, immigration attorney Jose Penalosa. Hello, Jose.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for the invitation, and pleasure to be here with you in Santiago today.
Welcome.
Jose has been involved in politics. He's run for office. He ran in 2010 against Ed Pastor.
That is correct.
As an independent candidate. Jose has been an independent, not partial of either party, and he's been able to offer an unbiased, objective perspective on politics. I noticed a long time ago, because that's how I got to know you, Jose, is as a political candidate.
That's correct.
Right. And since then, What has happened this past year is President Obama's Deferred Action Program, and then I realized that there's a lot that you can add and be for the community, and I've appreciated what you've done for the undocumented to apply for deferred actions. Not only that, but you're just a nice guy.
Hey, right on. Thank you.
And so I guess the first question I'd like to ask you, because this is, after all, Phoenix Talkback, the world's first Jewish-Chicano radio show, is Mr. Penalosa.
Yes.
Do you consider yourself a Chicano?
Yes, in the general sense of the term, Chicano is defined as a Mexican-American that resides here in the United States, obviously, and that term has been around for about 40 to 50 years. So to that extent, yes. And I will tell you, when I was an undergraduate at UCLA, I took Chicano study courses. And then when I came to law school here at Arizona State University, I was a member of the Chicano Law Students Associations. Today, those organizations no longer exist. They have different names.
Such as, instead of Chicano Studies, it's called Mexican-American Studies.
That is correct.
And so what do you think of what's been happening in Tucson, Tom Horne's effort with HB 2281 to eradicate Mexican-American Studies?
Well, I believe there's two sides to every issue, and obviously Mr. Horne's side won out through his position as the Attorney General and Superintendent of Board of Education, Director of Education, should I say, and also through the judicial system. It's a very long, complicated judicial process, but basically it's this. It's the Latino or Chicano Studies program down in the Tucson School District that exists and that was very successful and had very good leadership. However, the state of Arizona believed that that program was inappropriate and it was teaching philosophies that were different than what should be mainstream courses. So obviously both sides had their arguments. The state of Arizona won out, and here we are today.
But how can you not teach a perspective of history without taking a stand and having the perspective of either the oppressed or the oppressors? Because that seems to be the definition of Western expansion into the interior of the United States, is not only taming the land, but also dealing with people. And the people we're talking about are Native Americans and into Mexico. I can't recall exactly how the lines were drawn, but come on, the line was drawn. You can't study history without taking a certain perspective, one at a time. And I think to eradicate or erase that perspective or diminish it does a disservice to the people here in North America.
Especially for those of us who live in the Southwest, Arizona, New Mexico, California, and the parts that were once Mexico before the Treaty of Guadalupe.
Right, that is very correct. I think a couple things is, number one is that probably folks that were against the program believe that, look, if you want to study these particular issues, you can study at our universities in the state, our community colleges, where those courses are offered in a different intellectual environment. You're over the age of 18, you're able to make your own decisions. I believe that was part of one of their philosophies. But we still need to remember where we came from. Interesting, I recently completed last year a course through the Flynn Brown Foundation, a nonpartisan group, and developing civic leadership. And the first book that we had to read was The History of Arizona. And within that book, these items about the relationship between Mexico, Spain, and the United States was very influential in the development of Arizona and to where we are today, from being progressives now to where we're at to being conservatives. So it's very important that we study that and we know our history.
I think what really offends me, and I don't want anyone to think that I'm biased towards any specific group, except, I am Jewish, so I've got a little...
Understandable.
Just a little understandably biased towards Jews and Judaism, that sort of thing. But I just don't like hearing that history gets eliminated or erased. This is like 1984-ish. This is like Brave New World, where they edit whole blocks of information. This is wrong. I don't care if I was in France. I wouldn't like to see this happen. Or in Korea, if unification had taken place, to see the history of a whole people get eliminated. It's just wrong. It's bizarre. It's newspeak. That's my contention about that. And I happen to be here in the Southwest. And this show is, after all, called the world's first Jewish-Chicano Radio Show. So come on, give it up. Yeah.
Jose, where does the Tucson Mexican-American Studies program stand now? Is it a done deal? Is there any recourse for those individuals in Tucson who wish to, other than taking classes somewhere else? I mean, are the legal steps already taken possible?
I couldn't answer that question with specific legal details, although I am an attorney. I would say is I believe the only way it can be resuscitated would be continued advocacy, one, and number two is that if in the future we have a different superintendent of public education that would be amenable to that, and that would probably perhaps only be a Democrat, and perhaps have an attorney general that would not prosecute that particular case. And then probably as a population grows of the Latinos in our educational system, that might be a force to reckon with to bring back these optional studies. Ironically, you look around the valley here, everybody wants to learn Spanish, Spanish immersion. We want to teach our kids Spanish and another foreign language, but yet we can't study Mexican history or Latino history. It doesn't jibe well together.
You know, years ago, I worked for a local Latino-based organization that had Tempe Elementary School District Chicano Studies. And there's something that I think I need to share with people that is very important. Back then, we had the teacher talking about Mexican-American history, and there was a young, probably I'd say 10-year-old child in the back, looked very down, very depressed. As he listened to the history and some of his history, I saw his head pick up and his eyes fill with pride. For probably the first time in his life, he understood where he came from, who he was, and that he had a history and he had a real chance to move forward. And I'll never forget the change from the beginning of that class to the end of that class as he began to feel the pride in his culture. And I think that's so important that so often we've been pushed to the side. And I believe that we need to advocate, continue to advocate, as you said, for that Tucson class, the MAS studies, Mexican-American studies, and make sure that it's around the state.
Well, I read today that Curtis Acosta, who's been with the program for many, many years, is leaving the district. The school year is coming to an end, and Curtis Acosta is on his way out. That's a shame. This shouldn't happen to good teachers. And what you were mentioning before, Santiago, about the effect on the student, for the student's ears to perk up and get interested in studies, that's called the affective domain. And I really haven't heard very much about that. We've got numbers of student successes, that's quantifiable, but as an educator, and I'm an educator, that cannot be ignored, that there's a matter of great buy-in and pride when students get into their studies. You know, we've got Jose Penalosa here in the studio. This is Phoenix Talkback, and you are welcome to call 602-277-5369. That's 277-5369, and ask Jose a question. Ask us a question. We're going to be talking about other topics. If you're outside the 602 area code, you can call 1-866-536-1100. Jose, a few moments ago, you mentioned that things could change and the Mexican-American Studies program could come back if we had a different superintendent of education. And you also mentioned in a different attorney general. Ironically enough, those two positions that have had an effect, and those two positions of two different people we're talking about, we've talked about on this program. Are you aware that Arizona Senator Steve Gallardo has called for the impeachment of Tom Horne, who is responsible for pushing through HB 2281, which, shall I say it, killed the Mexican-American Studies program? Would you get on board impeachment of Tom Horne?
I believe I would on two fronts. Number one, as an attorney, what Mr. Horne pled guilty to, ironically, on the same day that Jody Arias was found guilty, he pled guilty and he took advantage of that opportunity to be at the bottom of the news cycle to a hit-and-run criminal misdemeanor offense. By definition, he is a criminal. And ironically, he is our attorney general. As an attorney, we are held to high ethical standards, and he should be accountable to that by the State Bar of Arizona. I don't know what the appropriate sanction is. We're all imperfect, but he is the attorney general. He sets the standard. And if you have an attorney general with a misdemeanor conviction, and given his past record, as we're all aware about, being suspended by the SEC many years ago.
Right, he can't go in and argue those cases, right?
Correct. Mm-hmm. Another campaign finance allegations against him. It puts him in a very dubious position. So I think as an attorney, and all attorneys in the state of Arizona, though we make mistakes and though we are censored, this is our top law enforcement officer, and he should resign. He should have some type of dignity. Now, in terms of being a politician, I believe that Mr. Gallardo is correct. There should be accountability. If this was, vice versa, Mr. Eric Holder, the Attorney General, with this type of conviction, you better believe the Republicans would be calling for his resignation.
Right.
It's inappropriate. There has to be a precedent. He's not a politician. He's the Attorney General, top law enforcement officer in this state.
What a shame that we've got that kind of Attorney General. And ironically enough, before he became Attorney General, as I said, He was the superintendent of instruction. And it's kind of funny how a pebble that is thrown into the water can create waves that affect and continue to affect. I wish that the voters had realized that this was the same Tom Horne that basically tried to rewrite history or kill a sense of history in a majority of the people. Now that the election has taken place and many Latinos have come out to vote, do you think that maybe Arizona can turn blue? I hope so. Am I asking you too broad of a question?
No, absolutely not. I believe that independent party, I think a lot of folks, I want to believe, and that's how I believe in my heart, we vote the person, really. And I think time has showed us that. My objective opinion. Number two, though, I believe that there are folks who are waiting, and I think the demographics will bear out, have left the Republican Party or independents or now who are Democrats who are looking for that particular candidate in the future. And so, yes, it certainly is a possibility. And all we have to look at is to go to the state of California in 1993 when Pete Wilson was governor there. The state was red. Before Pete Wilson was Duke Majian. And there's a long line of folks there with Governor Reagan. And now today, it's extremely difficult outside of Arnold Schwarzenegger for a Republican to be governor in the state of California. Look at all the other ancillary positions, Lieutenant Governor, Attorney General. Look at that. And so that's going to be reality down the road here in the state of Arizona.
Okay, folks, we're going to go into a hard break, as you can tell by the music underneath my voice. 602-277-5369 to call in and ask Jose Penalosa, immigration rights attorney, a question. You are encouraged. Here on Phoenix Talkback. Thank you very much. Welcome back to Phoenix Talkback. I'm in the studio with Jose Penalosa, immigration attorney in Phoenix, Arizona, and Santiago, James Chavez, my co-host. Hey, welcome back to the second portion of the show. Jose, this last week, we've witnessed that in the U.S. House of Representatives, they declared some sort of consensus that the House is now going to pass comprehensive immigration reform, hopefully, to the Senate, or at least a small committee has declared a consensus that I hope would represent the majority. One sticking point was if the undocumented would be not only given a path to citizenship, but given a path to the Affordable Health Care Act. I guess in the general sense, I'd like to ask you, how do you see comprehensive immigration reform progressing? Does it look like there's some progress going on?
Absolutely. And this is a result of the election of 2012 and obviously the advocacy of the last 10 years of immigrant right groups. So with the Gang of Eight proposal, I believe that was a compromise, and that was the best that the group came up with. And there's a lot of amendments going on in the Senate Judiciary Committee and the market process. On the House side, we haven't actually seen their plan, but the fact is there's also 8 folks, Congress people, that are working on that, and that looks very amenable also. So the main thing is that the Republicans have to be on the side. It's going to be an appropriate and a delicate balance between enforcement and also between benefits.
Speaking of enforcement, here in Arizona, the far extreme right contingent is trying to hinge on, they want comprehensive enforcement instead of comprehensive reform. I frankly think that if this comprehensive immigration reform is going to be dependent upon securing the border, it's hard to measure. And I think it's just a caveat to prevent the 13-year path to citizenship to commence.
Well, in terms of enforcement, a lot of the people that make comments that way, quite frankly, believe that Sheriff Arpaio has been the only law enforcement officer partaking in enforcement. He's a politician. And if he announces he detained 6 people today, the public believes the Department of Homeland Security has done nothing. And because they are part of the bureaucracy, they don't go public with what they do generally. So for folks to know, there are 3 to 4 detention centers in Arizona that handle undocumented immigrants, immigrants who commit crimes, etc. We have at most, number 2, the most ever Border Patrol agents. We have legal processes in place, zero tolerance, another policy called expedited order removal. These are all mechanisms along with all of the infrastructure at the border to discourage illegal immigration.
And this is what you deal with every day as people call upon you for your help.
That is correct, and that's objective evidence. All of this exists here in the state of Arizona. It's just not brought forth by the parties that are talking about enforcement. They're giving you anecdotal stories, and they're saying things that perhaps they're really not completely educated about.
One of the things that I think most people don't quite grasp is just how much enforcement has kicked up under the Obama administration, comparatively speaking, to past presidents. Can you illustrate a little bit about how that's changed, how maybe perhaps more people are being deported now under Obama rather than Bush previous 8 years?
Sure. In all fairness to the administration today, is that the genesis of this started under the Clinton administration after the Oklahoma City bombing. There was legislation that was enacted at that time in the late 90s. And funding came about the late 90s, early 2000s under George Bush. And so when President Obama became president, he inherited this system already into place. The bureaucracy of detention centers such as CCA and GEO. Number 2, many thousands of Border Patrol agents, hundreds of immigration judges, detention centers across the United States, prosecutors for Department of Homeland Security.
It's a racket.
So the infrastructure was there, and it's turned into the immigration industrial complex. Yeah. A lot of folks depend upon their living on, and I will be direct, on illegal immigration. And so the president inherited this bureaucracy. And so this machine just took off under his administration, and it further took off when 287G came about, and that was signed into law under President Clinton, not under President Bush. And so this system came in, he comes in, and it's already going very smooth as a nice machine. And once he realized that, I believe that when he was candidate Obama, he made the promise of comprehensive immigration reform to stop that. It didn't occur. It created a vacuum, and therefore folks like Governor Brewer came to power, Mr. Pierce, Mr. Arpaio, Mr. Kavanaugh, and have brought forth 1070. And it's because of that, the president's inactions and the Congress inactions is because of the system we have today. Now, as a result of the election in 2012, the president, the Congress, and the GOP recognize that reform must occur.
Speaking of one of the names you mentioned Russell Pierce. He's been coming out of his cubbyhole lately. He was interviewed by the Arizona Republic. Why do you think he's coming out of his hole?
Well, he's perhaps one of the lone voices that has a reputation from SB 1070 that is against comprehensive immigration reform at any level. We have to remember that he's the president or one of the officers of Ban Amnesty Now. And so, therefore, he's their quote-unquote spokesperson or advocate. And he also had a radio show after he lost the recall election regarding those particular issues. So,
yes, he sat in this very chair I'm sitting in today.
Russell,
I don't see you here anywhere. Is Russell here? Where is he?
He's not here right now.
No.
I believe he's also a Republican official, assistant chair, vice chair.
Of the party.
Of the party, yes.
Correct. And so, from what positions he's speaking, I really don't know. I would assume Ban Amnesty Now position, and obviously that's his right. And I think there's more in our democracy. It's great to have that debate. And to some extent, both sides have brought us to the point where we're at today. Reform's going to happen. He's upset because Senator McCain is leading the way on this particular reform and other influential Republicans. And he just can't accept this, perhaps.
Well, I hope that Joe Arpaio steps down because he breaks his other arm and Russell Pierce runs for sheriff in his place. I'd like to see him lose a second time. Hello, you're on Phoenix Talkback. Who's this?
This is Gail.
Hello, Gail.
I have a question for Mr. Penalosa. He made such a good point a little bit ago about voting for the person instead of, following your party candidate. And in this last election we had with Arpaio et al., I am a registered Democrat. And I was for the independent candidate from the beginning. And not just me, but there were others of us as well, and we got nothing but criticism about what bad Democrats we were.
Oh, yeah, right. She's
so
right.
I'm curious why Mr. Penalosa is an independent, and why the independents, because Mike Stauffer got like 4% of the vote. Mm-hmm. And why don't they more, I don't know, instead of following parties, why don't they more often get behind an independent candidate?
Good question, Jose.
Excellent. Well, I will tell you very, very briefly is that in my lifetime, I'm over 50 years of age today, and I've been both a Republican and I've been a Democrat, and I've been frustrated with both parties, quite frankly, and so therefore I felt it was appropriate for me to be an independent, because at my age, I'm not going to follow what somebody tells me to do because I have to do that. I'm independent, self-employed, and I enjoy that particular freedom. But unfortunately, independents in terms of running, as you know, the cards are against them. We have to get more signatures. Sometimes we don't get the same clean election money. People on the street aren't going to give us money to campaign and to go out there. And at the end of the day, the party comes down and says the independent doesn't have an opportunity to win. And so far, that has been true. And I know some folks like Paul Johnson and his proposition last year to try to get on the ballot, which was unsuccessful, was a measure to remedy that and to allow independents to come out. And that didn't occur. But as we keep going on, perhaps we'll gain more influence and power.
Yes, Gail, does it answer your question?
Yes, it does, and thank you so much for that.
Okay, thank you very much, Gail. All right. Well, let's take a short break here on Phoenix Talkback. You can call in at 602-277-5369 and ask Jose Penalosa a question on Phoenix Talkback. Is this your car? Or is this your car? The ASE certified mechanics at A&B Automotive have the expertise to make your car sound like this. You can rely on A&B Automotive to keep you safe on the road. Go see them at 1235 East Dunlap in Phoenix, Arizona, or call them at 602-906-9579. Se habla español. They're also on the web at abautomotiveaz.com. A&B Automotive, 1235 East Dunlap in Phoenix, 602-906-9579. Because you don't want your car to sound like this. You want it to sound like this. A&B Automotive, 602-906-9579. Tell them Phoenix Talkback sent you. Do you have a business or a message you would like to promote? Phoenix Talkback would like to help you. Phoenix Talkback is now available to you to help you tell the world whatever they need to know. When you advertise on Phoenix Talkback, not only will your message be heard on the radio, it will also be heard on the internet for as long as there is an internet, and we think that will be for a very long time. Our creative sound engineers will craft a custom-made, memorable image people will hear about your product or your message. Try us. Try Phoenix Talkback for your advertising needs. Right now, we're new and we're pretty inexpensive. So this is a golden opportunity for you to reach out to the growing number of listeners who are tuning into Phoenix Talkback. Call us at 602-910-4568. That's 602-910-4568 to get with our program and reach all the listeners. They're waiting for you. Welcome back to Phoenix Talkback. I'm Lou, and I'm in the studio with my co-host Santiago, and we have in the studio with us immigration attorney Jose Penalosa. And you can call up and ask him a question at 602-277-5369 or 1-866-536-1100.
Jose, I have a question for you on deferred action. Can you educate me a little bit on where the people who first applied, or where are they at now? And if I were to apply today, how long would it take before I see some results in my application? Can you kind of walk me through a little bit of that whole process? Because I know you specialize in that, and that's one of the things that you're working on in the community.
Correct. That is correct. Deferred action, very briefly, is a mechanism that exists in Immigration and Nationality Act and in the discretion of the Department of Homeland Security. And for a lot of folks to know that this has been around a long time, this is not anything new that President Obama has done. And matter of fact, George Bush I instituted deferred action for many folks back in the early 90s when I started my legal career. But today the program is for young children who are brought to the United States by their parents through no fault of their own, whether lawfully or unlawfully, and have remained here and gone to school here and been successful here in the United States. So there is an application process, and we've had cases been approved in 2 months, and we've had cases as long as 8 months. So there's really no rhyme or reason to it. The only folks that have priority are the young students who are actively involved in a deportation or removal case. The Department of Homeland Security gives those cases priority.
And to kind of take off a little bit of what Lou mentioned earlier about the driver's licenses, that the governor is denying these particular deferred students. How does that impact their lives?
Well, significantly, because most of the students are obviously over 16 years of age. They want to drive. They have a need to drive to go to work, to go to school, to help their parents out. I have an 18-year-old daughter, and the first thing she did at 16, I want to drive. And so it is beneficial. And so a lot of these kids go to community college, universities, they have jobs, they have to take care of their parents, they have younger brothers and sisters, and they can't lawfully drive. And it's a major impediment. We don't live in New York City or Chicago where people can walk from point A to point B. We're in a major metropolitan city where our lives are all around the valley, and these young kids need driver's license. It's not good public policy to have something like this, an interpretation from the state of Arizona, when these kids could have driver's license, insurance on their vehicles, and be responsible. 38 to 40 other states can't be wrong, and Governor Brewer correct.
Well, in New Mexico, despite the governor's best efforts there, New Mexico is able to keep driver's licenses for the undocumented. In Illinois, it's a different story where it looks like a polling of the people is that they want driver's licenses for the undocumented, yet they don't have it. There seems to be a mishmash all around the country. And you would think that the Republicans would be in favor of this, Republican governors would be in favor of this, and that most people would be in favor of this so they can be registered, they can buy insurance. You're right. A lot more economic activity, maybe buy cars. People are going to drive anyway. And why risk raising the premium for an uninsured driver? I don't understand it. It doesn't make any sense. So here in Arizona, a judge denied the injunction against Governor Brewer based on the idea that Governor Brewer is now trying to preempt federal law. Now this becomes a matter of the relationship between the federal government and Arizona. Under what guise? The right wing would say it's a privilege, it's not a right, but it is a right in some way, isn't it? Have parity with everybody else. It doesn't take away the rights of anybody else if an undocumented person has a license. And I don't understand why Governor Brewer is trying to deny the undocumented a driver's license. I know this is a mouthful, but what do you think?
What would be the rationale for the governor to do something like this?
Thank you, Santiago. Thank you.
Well, I believe her rationale is to be consistent perhaps with 1070 and be hard on immigration. Number two, perhaps folks can look at her relationship with the president. It's not very well, so anything that he does, she would have to be against. And then number three, perhaps there's some type of animus or insincerity toward the Dreamers. So if you put it in perspective, Governor Brewer came out with her announcement on August 15, 2012, the same day the program started. So, I mean, that really has to create something you have to think about. Why do it on that day? A lot of kids were very excited and emotional to apply that day. And it was a bittersweet day because they both cried and they were happy. And before that, where this becomes insincere, I've had many clients in the last 20-something years that have driver's license and don't have a work permit. The state of Arizona was giving driver's license to folks involved in a deportation case as long as they had their court paperwork and an identification document from their country of origin. And they would give that driver's license from the first court date to the next court date. These folks have no more status, less than actually what the Dreamers have. The Dreamers have authorization to be here, Social Security card, and they're going to have, as we see through reform, a direct path to become a legal resident and a U.S. citizen. So that's why when you look at this and her change, it's really insincere. And I just look at this as another opportunity to remain relevant so she can be on the talk shows and still be relevant within the party. And unfortunately, the kids are the victims.
So it sounds like spite is the motivating factor.
That probably is appropriate. And so I think through the course of time, through this litigation, the equal protection argument will win out. And this is what Lou was making reference to, the rights. And so Judge Campbell was I was at the hearing, he was very knowledgeable about that. And he told the governor's attorneys, I have people here in the court that are material witnesses in criminal cases that are here unlawfully. And we let them loose pending the criminal case. And you guys give them a driver's license after they get a work permit from the Department of Homeland Security. How do you justify that? And they really couldn't answer Judge Campbell that. So the equal protection argument is going to be the best argument for the Dreamers to be successful on. That's one of the two claims that are still, I believe, still pending, but it did not merit a preliminary injunction.
So it's still before Judge Campbell?
Absolutely. There's going to be further hearings on that particular issue. This is going to be drawn out, and unfortunately, we're going to have to wait perhaps until comprehensive immigration reform happens. And once we have a bill signed by the president, I hope that the Republican leadership in the Senate, Senator McCain and Senator Flake, can meet with the governor and say, look, time to put this behind you. Let's move on in the interest of the state and these young children. As Senator McCain said, these are God's children.
Amen.
Well, right now it's just an unnecessary inconvenience that can have a great effect on someone's life, basically drain them of their resources because they're put between a rock and a hard place. If they can't get there to go to work, or if they need to drive to go to a court hearing, and if someone is there unlawful, I mean, come on, these Republicans such as Jan Brewer need to deal and be realistic. But I think you're right, Santiago. I think it is out of spite. It's very disappointing.
Yes.
If I can see this so obviously, I hope that all Latino voters can see this and will remember it. That's really what I think.
Vote.
You're involved in a voter registration effort, aren't you? Or you have been, Santiago?
Always have, always will be.
Right.
You know, the way to empower our community is to register and get out there, campaign, and run or support someone that you believe in. And most of all, get out there and vote.
Well, there's a contradiction happening here in this country, and related to Arizona is the organization called True the Vote. Thanks to comprehensive immigration is only being mainlined to the front burner because these Republicans think that, if we pass comprehensive immigration reform, it'll create a lot of new Democratic voters. Even the Republican Party here in Arizona has got to know that they risk losing the Latino vote if they continue making it difficult for the undocumented, and most of the undocumented come from Mexico, difficult to exist and live. The contradictions are pretty obvious to me, I'll say this. It's been politicized, and you're right, Jose, the young people are the ones who suffer.
That's correct. And I think in terms of the election, even before comprehensive immigration reform, we just have to go back to the 70s. And many Latinos voted for Republican candidates because they had an affiliation. I'm going to give you an example in California. A lot of folks, Latinos, voted for President Reagan when he won the presidency in 80 and 84. And then we also have to look at Mr. Bush in 2000s. He pulled in 40 to 45% of the Latino vote. And why did he do that? Because I believe that people like the person. And number two, he came from a state, Texas, where he adapted and he was Latino, quote unquote, friendly. And so the notion that all these new folks that are going to immigrate instantly become Democrats when they become citizens, I believe is fundamentally incorrect. Now, even if that were to be true, the way that comprehensive immigration reform is set out is that right now, according to the Gang of Eight plan, folks have to wait 13 years to become a legal permanent resident. And then after that, then they have to wait 5 years to become a naturalized U.S. citizen. So we're talking 18 to 20 years to actually somebody can vote in an election. Many things can happen during that particular time period. A lot of those folks might not even be able to speak English at that time. A lot of them might already be deceased. A lot of folks might have maybe gotten problems with the law. So to believe that everyone's going to become 1 million folks or 100% of 1 million is going to become a U.S. citizen is incorrect. In Arizona today, we have over 500,000 legal permanent residents that have not applied to become U.S. citizens from all countries around the world.
I'd like to remind you the way that the comprehensive immigration reform has been written by the Gang of Eight is that this path of citizenship would not start, the clock would not start until the border is secure. Or am I wrong about that?
They're trying to push that through.
I see.
I believe that that's
There's an initial 6-month border plan, and that has to be established. and then before application period is open. And then you are correct, there are biometrics that the border has to be, according, I believe, 90% secure in order for folks to become legal permanent residents. So it's a long pathway for a lot of these 11 million folks to become U.S. citizens and vote and have an impact in this particular election. What people should be concerned about are their kids.
And we're concerned about what's right and transparent and accountable here on Phoenix Talkback. Jose Penalosa, I want to thank you for being on today's show.
Thank you. Had a great time with you guys.
Jose.
Santiago,
Thank you so much, Jose. Learned a lot.